Welcome to Redefining Medicine, an intimate and personalized program that illustrates a different side of the practice of medicine. Our in-depth conversations will focus on the physicians and practitioners who are redefining medicine through their integrative, functional, and holistic approach to health and well-being.
Welcome to our weekly podcast, Redefining Medicine. We are happy to welcome Dr. Kien Vuu, a concierge performance and longevity physician, founder of Vuu Longevity and Performance Clinic, an assistant professor of health sciences at UCLA, an author, and an American Board of Anti-Aging and Regenerative Fellow. Welcome and thank you for being with us.
Thank you. It's really good to be here and to be a part of family here at the A4M.
Thank you. Let's get started. Dr. Vuu, you have a powerful story of personal illness from childhood. Will you share this story with us?
Sure. I mean, really, it's part of the backdrop of my life. You know, I was trained as an interventional radiologist, and I'm pretty sure everybody in the audience here knows, but for those that don't, what is an interventional radiologist? Well, it's a minimally invasive surgeon that uses imaging, MRI, CT, and ultrasound to do minimally invasive procedures. And so five years ago, I caught myself, really at the top of my game, bought a fancy house, bought a fancy car. I traveled around the world to speak of new techniques in interventional radiology. But what I also discovered, and underneath that white coat, was that I was overweight, I was diabetic, I was hypertensive, and I was on prescription medications. And one would say, how does a doctor get early disease? And if I had to trace back now and I look back at all the techniques and all the healing that I've gotten as I reverse those chronic conditions, it really led to my childhood. And what is that? Well, I was actually born in Vietnam. My parents were Chinese immigrants to Vietnam. So they were immigrants in Vietnam. And I was born there a couple years after the Vietnam War. So the communists had come over and they had sieged over all the businesses. My parents had owned a pharmacy, they'd taken it away. And so my parents didn't think there was going to be any future for me there. And so we left, and we actually left by means of a refugee boat. We were Chinese immigrants packed with 2,000 other refugees in this boat, crammed like sardines. And we were actually on that boat for 8 months. There was no rooms in the Philippine refugee camps at the time. And so we were docked, on that boat. And on that boat, I was actually the only infant that survived. Some people fell off the boat. Some people had dysentery. I had dysentery. My dad, really gets choked up every time he talks about that story of how he held me in his arms like a floppy baby. We spent 8 months on the boat and then 3 months in a Philippine refugee camp. And then, we were sponsored to America by a Catholic church. And you would think, a kid that has survived all being on a boat and being in a refugee camp would be very, very grateful here in America. But that's not the case. I grew up here. I really felt like I was an outsider. I felt like this Asian immigrant poor kid where I got bused to a more affluent area of school and I was constantly being made fun of. From the holes in my hand-me-down clothes to the stinky food my mom made, a lot of people calling me chinky and things like that. And that really led me to feel instances of I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, and things like that. And that brewed me, took me into adulthood. And when you're not aligned with who you're meant to be, you're going to make choices for yourself and your health that's not going to be in alignment of your highest good. And that's actually how I got disease earlier on, how I got disease as an attending MD physician. And unfortunately, that disease was my gift, because being able to reverse that, I am so excited to be able to share, everything I've learned, not only from the A4M, but from other personal development that I've done over the years that I bring to my clients now.
Thank you so much for sharing that incredible story and journey. How did you eventually break out of this harmful pattern that was causing you this illness?
It's all about awareness and consciousness. As I studied deep into epigenetics, nutrition, and spirituality, I understood. I talk about in my book, Thrive State, what actually determines whether a cell is functionally optimally that gives us optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, and what makes a cell not be at its optimum, a suboptimal functioning cell that leads down to, symptoms and chronic disease. Well, our cells and our DNA are constantly interacting with the energetics that are around it, be it sound, be it food, be it all these things. I talk about 7 major things in my book that our cells are constantly listening to. And that energy that we provide ourselves, that gives ourselves the information to thrive and to be in that optimal state, or to hunker down and be in that stress and survive state. So where does the consciousness come in? Well, what are the 7 major things? And I talk about this with a major epigenetic researcher, with Stephen Cole, and we come up with the 7 things, which are sleep, nutrition, movement, stress and emotional mastery, relationships, mindset, and purpose. And these are things that we could actually make conscious new choices and actions. So the key thing for me is to recognize that I am in control of my bioenergetic state. I get to choose based on my thoughts, based on how I feel and how I act, whether I'm going to be in a thrive state or whether I'm in the stress state. And when you know you have that power, you can then say, oh, wow, you know what? I'm starting to crave that chocolate cake. You can catch yourself, oh, there's that craving again. And you could bring awareness to that. And then I have a few techniques that people can use to actually shift that craving or shift that old repetitive thought into a thought that's more aligned with who you are, more aligned to optimal health, longevity, and peak performance.
The topic of race and cultural experiences is incredibly important for clinicians to appreciate and understand, especially in a country as diverse as the United States. Is there anything particular you wish your colleagues would better understand or integrate into practice when it comes to cultural competence?
Oh, this is a great question. And the key thing I wish people would take on is empathy, is really understanding another human being. What in my book, again, Thrive State, I talk about the bioenergetic state, these 7 things that we could focus on to really put ourselves in the position to thrive or go into a stress state. Now, we control that. Now, if it's diet, sleep, nutrition, exercise, mindset, thought, if it's all these things, the cultural component, how somebody grew up, makes such a big difference in terms of understanding their ability to take the actions that you want them to take. For example, I work with some clients where, culturally, rice is a staple, but for so many in particularly the Asian community, pre-diabetes and diabetes is so high. And to understand this comfort food that people have gotten over rice and to be able to switch them to some alternatives, you can't just say, hey, you got to wipe out your rice. It's understanding where they're coming from. And that's just a very simple example with diet, but people culturally have ways they think about community, ways they think about collaboration, ways they think about, how they approach their diet, their health, their sleep. And so you need to understand that. That's the best way to listen to somebody, to be able to create an energetic resonance with your client, and then therefore get them to take the proper actions for them to actually transform their life. And if you don't understand that component, it's going to be a very, very difficult doctor-patient relationship.
That's quite a shift for conventional medicine, isn't it?
Absolutely. Conventional medicine has always been focused on symptoms and the physical body, but they always ignore the emotional, spiritual, and mental components as well. And I find the ideas from the A4M and people who are opening up to all the other different possibilities that actually affect health, that I actually see the shift happening.
Personal wellness can sometimes become a secondary priority to the many other responsibilities that healthcare providers must juggle. How have you kept yourself grounded and centered, especially during the past year of various unexpected changes and challenges?
Great question. One, last year has been, probably one of the hardest years anyone had to deal with, but with any struggle, like Ram Dass says, struggle is really the sandpaper for awakening. And I could see so many gifts that have come out of it. It's been, when COVID first hit, I could remember feeling really scared because all my bank accounts and investment took a huge plummet. My ability to actually work in a clinic was decreased. And so I was fearing many, many different things. But as you face that fear, as you face those negative emotions, you can then say, oh, okay, those are just thoughts that are going on that I don't actually have to stick with. So I find so many people after the pandemic have become so resilient because they've been able to work on themselves, do the inner work so that no matter what life throws at them, all these different circumstances that they throw at them, people at the end of the day can choose how they think, how they feel, and the type of actions that they want to take to have the type of life and the type of health that that they desire. And so for me as a busy clinician, the important thing is always be conscious, always be aware of what you're thinking and how your body is, and recognize that there could be so many things, as a clinician, I understand there could be so many people bombarding you with, phone calls, with emails, or with notes, with labs to review. But I find that if I find myself getting stressed out, I can, I could like start to farm out some of those tasks. And that's the key thing, is to always be aware. Am I present? And am I in those emotional states that I desire, such as love, such as joy, such as connection? And if I can be there consciously, anything that comes out of my way, I can then course correct right then and there, always knowing that I've got the choice. And so one of the key things I tell a lot of people, particularly physicians, if you want to focus in on your health, make sure all those things get scheduled into your life. Before, when I had a crazy surgeon schedule, I just wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating well. Well, now I track everything. What time I'm waking up? Am I waking up the same time and going to bed every night? I'm putting down what I'm eating. I'm putting down times where I need some self-care time to work on my emotions and stress. If those are in your calendar, those are the things you prioritize, that's who you will become. So I think the key thing is recognizing who you want to become and make sure that the actions that you take, you put into your calendar to become that person.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vuu, for an incredible and insightful interview. We wish you all the best and all the best of luck on your upcoming book. Thank you for being with us.
It's a pleasure to be on.